All right, let's bring in Mike Tobin, who is live in Tel Aviv with the latest on the ground. Mike, good morning.
Good morning. We have both the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian claiming victory now in this first full day in which the ceasefire appears to be holding. Now, you just heard from President Trump saying that the Iranian nuclear program has been set back, has been devastated, has been obliterated, to kind of paraphrase his words. But the contrary reporting that they're referring to, we've got that information through the Reuters news agency, citing U.S. intelligence officials saying that the Iranian nuclear program was set back a matter of months, not years. Still, in light of that, you have the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claiming victory, saying two existential threats to the Jewish state have been removed: the Iranian nuclear program, and that he claims that they have decimated the ballistic missile arsenal that belonged to Iran. Here's the Prime Minister.
Citizens of Israel, on your behalf, I thank my friend President Trump and the United States for their part in the defense of Israel and in removing the Iranian nuclear threat. The participation of the U.S. in the campaign, not only organizationally but also offensively, is a historic event.
Now, the war in Gaza continues, and Israel suffered a setback there. 7 soldiers have been killed. They were operating in a Puma armored vehicle, which is pretty much just an old British Challenger tank with the turret removed. A Palestinian managed to attach a bomb to that vehicle and detonate it, killing the soldiers inside. 50 Israeli hostages are still believed to be held in the Gaza Strip, and 20 of them are believed to be alive. Carly and Todd.
All right, Mike Tobin live for us. Mike, thank you. Let's bring in former Navy submariner, naval defense expert, and senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, Bryan Clark. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And speaking of the Navy, U.S. Navy subs launched 30 Tomahawk missiles as part of the Iranian strike, Operation Midnight Hammer. So what do you think about the president's assessment of the success of that mission that we just heard?
Well, I think these intel reports are often pretty preliminary, right? So the first time you look at it, you're going to make a really rough assessment of what might have happened. And I think the strike was obviously successful, obviously caused a lot of damage. Obviously, I took away the ability to access those facilities and probably damaged them significantly underground. So I think that's sort of a given. Everybody agrees to that. I think the question is, how long did this delay the program? And I think a lot of the initial assessments are based on the fact that the uranium is still around and then maybe got moved somewhere else. But there's a big difference between having some somewhat enriched uranium in a pile somewhere and having the ability to translate that into a bomb.
Well, one of the big things that will come out of this NATO summit this morning is, of course, the 5% increase in NATO defense spending for all 32 nations, that 5% of their GDP. How significant is that in terms of weapons that money will be spent towards? And how much stronger do you think the NATO alliance will be as a result of this increased spending?
Well, it's huge. I mean, you think about most of these NATO countries have been barely getting to 2% of GDP. So this is almost a doubling of the money they spend on their military. And then in addition to that, spending 1.5% of GDP on infrastructure and cybersecurity and some of the other resilience initiatives that are needed to be able to defend against a nearby threat like Russia. So it's a huge increase, and it will cause those militaries to be a lot stronger. I think it'll be particularly impressive to see the level of redundancy that we'll get in Europe. I think some people say redundancy is bad, but in the military sense, it's usually good because you have more capacity then. And I think one of the things this will do is allow the NATO countries to maybe be able to combine their efforts and be able to have more capacity to address the Russian threat instead of having to specialize in one or two military disciplines.
Yeah, and right now I'm thinking back to March 4th when President Trump made those comments before Congress, and he promised to establish a new Office of Shipbuilding within the White House, revitalize the industry and bolster American Navy strength. How are we doing on that front?
I was doing pretty well. I was impressed with the office's actions to start the gears turning in terms of regulatory changes that start to incentivize companies to move into the shipbuilding industry. We've already seen some investment in U.S. shipyards. So Hanwha Industries, which is a Korean company, has invested and bought the Philly shipyard. That shipyard is now looking at building out commercial ships. There's a huge amount of money going into the U.S. Navy shipbuilding effort through this reconciliation bill. So definitely a lot of movement in shipbuilding. I would say we're going to see somewhat of a renaissance in U.S. shipbuilding. The only question is, can we sustain it, and will there be a demand for these ships on the part of companies that do shipping operations?
And going back for the past 2 weeks now, with the Iranian military being, I guess the key word of the day is decimated in terms of their military leaders. What is your assessment of Iranian military capability right now?
It's pretty much completely destroyed, I guess. Right now, there's very little of Iranian military left. Iran's military consists of the military force, the traditional military, and that's largely been destroyed by virtue of Israel's attacks. And then there's also this Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the special operations part of the military, and it's been damaged to quite an extent. It's unclear exactly how far down it is, but both sides of the military have been pretty much decimated, and there's not much of it left. And the question now is, Iran is going to lash out with its proxies, but doesn't really have the ability to defend its own territory. And so how far does it go, knowing that it's pretty much undefended right now?
Very good insight. And the NATO Secretary General congratulated President Trump on the strike. It is certainly something that will be discussed throughout the whole entire day during this NATO summit in the Netherlands. Bryan Clark, thank you for joining us.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.